Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Texas Homeschool Coalition vendor specific webinar. We hope you feel special. This is a webinar specifically for vendors, not a lot of groups or communities or populations. We just want to tailor it and custom it for you so that we can get your questions answered. So, with that being said, my name is Anita Scott, and I am the policy director with the Texas Homeschool Coalition going into year 4. That's kind of hard to believe. And with me today on this call is they are members of I call them the TEFA team. And so I'm looking at my screen. And so I'm just going to call them by name on what we'll call like my Brady Bunch window here. It has all these little windows right here. And then there are members of the Texas Homeschool Coalition team. Some of them you'll see on the camera, some of them you will not see on the camera. What's so interesting is some of them will have the opportunity to speak to me and you won't be able to hear them, but they'll navigate me and direct me in case I forget to say something or forget to ask a question or forget to highlight a question. We just really, really want to make sure that your questions are answered today. So again, thank you for joining this vendor specific webinar. Our goal is to empower you so that you can make decisions with confidence. That being said, I'm going to pass the torch over to the next window on my screen, and that's someone from the Texas Homeschool Coalition team, and his name is Larry Walstead. Larry, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody. Most of you probably already know who I am. Larry Walstead, Texas Homeschool Coalition Director of Business Development. And it's because of the conversations and interactions with you guys that we brought this to you, because I know you guys have a lot of questions and we want to make sure we went straight to the matter experts so you can get all your questions and answers answered here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. Awesome. Thank you for your introduction. Next on my Brady Bunch window is Mr. Daniel. So I'm just going to ask Daniel to introduce himself and tell us his role and a part of this whole process.
Hey there. So Daniel Warner, Texas State Director with Odyssey. So we are the Certified Educational Assistance Organization contracted with the Comptroller's Office, and we run the parent application, the school application, and the vendor portal all in one place, and all your best and brightest questions for customer support. So when you need to reach out, there's an issue on anything like that, we have a dedicated vendor support team as well to help handhold this entire process. Happy to be here. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Daniel. I love it. The best and brightest questions. All right. I love that. Awesome. All right. Next on my Brady Bunch window is Mr. Travis.
Thank you, Anita. So I work in the Texas Comptroller's Office on the Education Freedom Accounts team. I am in many ways the assistant to our program director, Mary Catherine Stout, and work on a broad portfolio of things. But one thing that I'm really focused on is how do we create a landscape in Texas that is accessible as possible to as many diverse service providers as possible. I have a direct stake in this because I'm actually married to an educator who serves a variety of families in a diverse capacity, whether that's homeschoolers or whether that's families who send their kid to school full time but want supplemental tutoring or courses on the side. And so, I have worked previously on the school choice programs in Florida. I have seen how both this is a great opportunity to expand access to diverse learning options and for educators to diversify how you earn money, have more flexible business arrangements, and also just how complex and burdensome sometimes the regulations and the paperwork and the hurdles can be. Certainly, we have worked with Odyssey to offer as streamlined and user-friendly of a process as possible, but there are always going to be hurdles and policy questions that we can help with. And, the other thing I'll say is that if we're not able to solve everything for you right here, right now, we're in the first year of the program, we have been working alongside Anita and many others, thinking about what is the long-term project to make this program as accessible as possible to as many legitimate providers as possible. And so part of the questions and feedback that we're going to be gathering here today. We will report back to our team and figure out how can we answer your questions, accommodate as many of you as possible, but then also what longer term fixes do we need to start considering? How can we continue to come alongside the community of parent educators and people who serve them to create as strong and open and accessible of a marketplace for the long term in the years to come in Texas.
That's so well said, Travis. Thank you. You kind of took some of the words out of my mouth, so I don't have to echo them now. But I love how you said we're thinking long term. This is the first iteration of the school choice program here in Texas, and so as much as we love to believe that Texas does things perfect, we just do things big. That doesn't mean we do them perfect. So that being said, this is the first iteration. So I'm so excited to already see 71 participants on this call, because that means you have questions and you need answers. And our goal is to empower you. And similar to what Travis said, if we don't have the answers today, the goal is to go back and get the answers and then bring them to you. It's not to leave you hanging or suspended where you have to try to figure things out. In this first iteration of the school choice program is to make sure we equip you. And so not seen on the camera, or also members of, or I should say, some of the staffers of the Texas Homeschool Coalition. So they're in the background, pushing some buttons, making things happen, keeping us on camera, keeping the volume at a right pace, making sure that when we go to the live Q&A, you'll see the questions pop up. So I definitely just want to pause and thank Atlee. I want to thank Amanda. I want to thank Nathan Bryant, Heather, Jessica, and I hope I just got everybody. So these are people who are in the background who have come together to make this webinar happen. That being said, I'm just going to pivot and switch gears and give you like a 2-minute high-level overview of what is TEFA. Why, Anita, you said the TEFA team. That sounds like an acronym, but we don't even know what that means. So just think, you're probably already familiar with the phrase school choice. You're probably already familiar with the phrase education savings account. So sometime back in October, our interim comptroller, Kelly Hancock, and the comptroller's office gave the name education savings account, and now it's called Texas Education Freedom Account. Okay. So when I say TEFA team, just think it's the Texas Education Freedom Account team. And what you need to know is that the Texas Education Freedom Account, that bill was passed last year in legislation. So in 2025, the bill was passed. I think it was signed May 2nd. Don't quote me on the day in the month of May, but it was signed by Governor Abbott at his mansion. It was a big welcoming party, because it basically meant, this is what it meant. Okay. I'm actually going to read you something from the TEFA website. It says, in 2025, the Texas legislature passed Senate Bill 2 and provided $1 billion in funding to create the Texas Education Freedom Account program and give parents greater freedom and flexibility in choosing the best educational environment for their children. Now, Anita, why did you read it from the website? Because I want you to know you don't have to memorize what I just said. You can actually go to the website. I just want to make sure you know what I say is already public and available to you. The TEFA program, administered by the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts, is the largest day one school choice initiative in the nation. Through this program, parents who choose to enroll their children outside of the public school system, including a private school or homeschool, or accepted into the program, and can use their child's TEFA funds to pay for approved education-related expenses through the program marketplace. So what you also need to know is that the program, the application window opened, I think it was February 4th, and then it was set to close. Okay, Travis, you're nodding your head. Awesome. It opened February 4th, and it was set to close March the 17th. And then there was a district judge in Texas who extended the window until March 31st. So that is tomorrow. So you can apply. So if you are a vendor, but you're also a homeschool parent, or you are a vendor and you're married to a homeschool parent, or you have a homeschool, a grandfather, a homeschool neighbor, your barber is a homeschooler, you can tell them, hey, tomorrow at 11:59 p.m., the application window closes. So please go ahead and apply. What you also need to know is that the Texas legislature, and by that I just mean the members of the House and the members of the Senate, they're the Texas legislature, and they agreed that $1 billion should suffice for about 100,000 applicants. Well, because we have so many in Texas who have been demanding funding for school choice, that means they have the choice to decide where their children go. There are well over 244 applications that have been submitted, but I don't know, Daniel and Travis, do you guys have like updated numbers on how many applications have been submitted?
I think we're close to 258,000 as of this morning.
Okay, 258,000. So if I had everybody come off mute, you can't, but it's okay. But if I had everybody come off mute, you would be like giving a round of applause, because that's just showing our members of the House and the members of the Senate. Look how many families are saying, I want to be able to direct the curriculum for my child. I want to be able to direct the morals and values that are placed in front of my children. I want what we talk about at the dinner table to match what's in the textbook, to match what's in the curriculum. They want to be in front of their children's education. And so that's what Texas is doing. So when we talked about an iteration, what we're saying is this is the first year the TEFA program is established. We can go back to the members of the House and the members of the Senate in 2027 and say, okay, this is what worked and this didn't work. We need new bill language. We want to clean up this section. Our members of our homeschool communities in Texas, our private school communities in Texas are saying this. And we can go back to the Texas legislature in 2027 and say, let's do an improvement with this. Let's take this part away. Let's clean this part up. So that is why you are here, to help us make this better. That is the whole purpose of this call, to make this one-day program, the biggest one-day program in Texas, better. So that being said, we already have questions that have come in, and that's because you, 80 participants, you've already been sending questions to Larry and Amanda, and you've been saying, what about this? And what about this? So Travis, if you and Daniel are okay with it, before we go to live Q&A, I'm just going to field through some questions that have already been sent to us, and then you guys come off mute and answer as best as possible, as one of you said, the best and brightest questions. So one of the first questions is, can you explain the difference between a micro school and a tutoring service? That's part one. And the second part is, does one need to be accredited versus the other?
So it's a great question. And this is one that comes up in state after state in terms of what is a micro school? What is the definition of a micro school? Because there's a lot of things that call themselves micro schools that don't necessarily fit into one box or another. And many of our friends in the micro school community like it that way. They don't want there to be a statutory definition, because the minute you have people defining micro school in statute, the minute you restrict somebody else or write them out of the equation, and we want to avoid doing that. So the bottom line is that if you are a micro school, for purposes of this program, you might be a participating private school, in which case you do need to be accredited, and you do need to have 2 years of operational history. And if you meet those requirements, then you can be qualified and participate as a participating private school. And that has some advantages, because it allows your families who enroll with you to qualify for the full funding amount. But also those families will have to take a state assessment. So for some micro schools, that is a route that makes sense. For other micro schools, you might want to sign on as a tutoring and teaching service, which would mean that you have families who are taking a class here, a class there. They're receiving other lessons or things of that nature that you're providing, and they're doing that on a flexible fee-for-service basis. And so for some micro schools, that might work for you. Now, those are not mutually exclusive. You might say also that I'm going to sign on as a participating private school, and then I'll also have more of a teaching and tutoring service set of offerings for families who want something a little more flexible like that. So there are different permutations, but the bottom line is that You can either sign on as a participating school. There's more requirements, but also potentially more funding there, or you can sign on as a tutoring and teaching service, or both.
Thank you, Travis. All right. I'm pitching the next question to you both. All right. This one says, now this goes straight into vendor questions. What are the qualifications to apply as a TEFA vendor? That's part one. And then, can a contractor to a big company sign up to be a vendor?
So I'll start, and then Daniel, I think, can provide some insight into what the process looks like on Odyssey's side. But for each type of vendor, there are specific requirements that are laid out in the law. Probably the most important sort of high points are, for a tutoring or teaching service, anyone who interacts with kids through this program, whether you're technically a tutor or a teacher or something else, you have to have a background check. So you're going to, and that's part of our application process, where you will receive the instructions on how to do that, and we need to have a current background check on file for any employee, whether they're a contractor or a full-time employee. If you're interacting with kids, we're going to need that background check. And then if you're tutoring, or teaching, there's specific requirements that you'll have to meet in terms of credentials or certification. Basically, you either have to be a Texas certified educator or a current employee of a accredited school, that could be a public or private school, or a retired educator. And if you meet one of those three requirements, then you're eligible. We do have a lot of employees who work for larger companies that are signing on. And so the question there would be, is your employer signing on as a vendor? In which case, they'll have a roster of employees who are eligible for TEFA services, and you would want to make sure that you're on that roster and work with your employer there. Or do you want to sign on for yourself? And if you want to sign on for yourself, then you're going to have to be registered to do business in Texas. And so that either means you need to be incorporated and registered with the state, or you can be a sole proprietor registered with your local county clerk. But you can sign up for yourself, and then if you meet all the credential requirements, you will be able to then serve as your own vendor. So we have some teachers and tutors that are working under the auspices of a larger company, and typically that larger company will handle the process and sign on as a vendor. But if they haven't done it yet, maybe you can alert them to that opportunity. We have others who go in and actually provide their own services as a private individual.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Daniel, did you want to echo or piggyback?
No, that was great. There's something I think someone asked earlier on. I don't know if it's like related or not. Like, is for parents to be vendors, and the statutes pretty unique about how close of a familial tie you can actually pay. I think it's like third degree of I forgot what the term is. I was just trying to look at. Anyway,
consanguinity.
Yeah, I knew it was something. I was trying to stop searching it, and it's like not relations. It's consanguinity. Yeah. So that's the only thing that I would kind of call out. So when you attest to either take money or a parent is paying for that could get, just if they're, that's just a one of the points where it could be a little, maybe a little more wise to perhaps pay, if you're a parent who's also a vendor, like credentialed to be a teacher, that maybe that parent like doesn't use, you can't pay yourself from your kid's account, but like, do you pay for, more of your curriculum, and kind of strategize on that level, what's allowed and what's not. So that was the only thing I was going to flag. Because I think that there was a question there, just so everyone's aware. But other than that, I think Travis covered it. But Travis, is there something that you want me to mention specifically? Okay, cool.
Awesome. I have questions percolating, but before I start asking questions, I'm going to just keep going down the list of questions that were sent to be respectful of our participants. You kind of touched on this, Travis, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it again in case someone is looking for an even more flushed out answer. And so this question is, can affiliates sign up to be vendors? And then that's one question. And then another question is, and Daniel, I saw you put this in the chat and it says more info on credentialing, but I'm going to go ahead and still ask that second question. So the first one is, can affiliates sign up to be vendors? Then the second question is is there a vendor checklist similar to a parent application checklist?
I guess I'll start with that first question, like defining what an affiliate is. I'm just not familiar with it. I think that, so it's like, are you working for a teaching, so probably something along that. But the checklist, I don't know that we have a vendor checklist, but I will say on that first one for more information, you're definitely just like categories of offerings on there, fingerprinting requirements. So that would probably say part of that checklist process. Like once you apply, then you kind of go into this fingerprint, approved pending fingerprinting. There's kind of what other kind of expenses are listed out in there as well. So yeah.
Got it. So
Sorry if
that
I missed that in there. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll walk them through sort of similar to a parent application checklist. The credentialing can walk them through. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And the application itself, I mean, just to zoom out a little bit,
Uh-huh.
just on that process, if that's helpful. So when vendors go and apply on the open link right now, they can go ahead and then they go through that process. And then once our team reviews whether, educate, is it a product? Is it a service? What exactly is it? We review that again, making sure that you're registered to do business with the Secretary of State and also in compliance with the comptroller, just good standing with the comptroller's office. And then once that's approved, then we send you another kind of, you have your portal, like a way a parent would have a portal or a school have the portal. And then you go to and insert all your offerings. So whether that's third grade math, fifth grade math, and that's when you go and curate the exact individual specificity of what the offering would show up in the marketplace. So it's kind of this two-step process. So we have to do the vetting on the front end to make sure, you're a business and we know who you are. And then once that's approved, then you go ahead, thousands of offerings, something like that. And I'll pause there.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And then when you said I'll pause there, this piggybacks your question along with this checklist. This question says, we want to apply. However, the process requires a comptroller's taxpayer number. We are just investigating the implications of that and what is involved. Any insight?
So that's your Texas ID number, like for tax purposes. And so that's what, when you file to do business, so I think it's a two-step process. So if you're a brand new business, you register your business with the Secretary of State's office. And then usually the way that so good standing with the comptroller's office is that they're checking you're not delinquent on any state owed taxes, basically. And so if you're a brand new business, in theory, you probably have no state owned, no delinquent taxes yet. But some companies, we've seen that some have not been able to participate for that reason. So it's a kind of a two-pronged approach. So the first door, the first gate getting through is that Secretary of State business filing.
So then a business that doesn't have a secretary, they haven't filed with the secretary, or they don't have a taxpayer number, they cannot be registered as a vendor then. They need that taxpayer number. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So I think when the way it works, like you register your business, you get that number I think I should double check, and maybe Travis, more, like once that's generated by CPA, by the Secretary of State, and then you put that in there, and then we run that ID number again, basically, and it might not show up that anything's owed.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then speaking of Texas and being in good standing with the Secretary of State and the taxpayer's number, another vendor said, we only do fully virtual service delivered from Virginia and contract with Texas families remotely. Will that in any way stop them from being a vendor, or will they still be allowed to be a vendor, but now through the comptroller's office through Odyssey?
Right, so they'd have to register to do business in the state. And if they're not done that, then that would automatically not let them participate.
Okay. So then your answer might help this next one, because this one says, we have no Texas office, no Texas employees, no physical presence, no Texas property. And what they still need to do, they still need to register with the Secretary of State. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good clarification, Anita, because there's different requirements for schools versus vendors. So schools, if you're an online school, you do have to have an office in the state where there is at least one employee. Whereas for vendors, the requirement is that you're registered to do business in the state, and then all your employees are appropriately credentialed and background checked. So it's a little bit different requirements for schools versus vendors.
Awesome. Okay. So I just heard you say that if you're a school, you do need to have a brick and mortar presence in Texas. But if you are a vendor, you need to register with the Secretary of State, be in good standing, not owe any back taxes. have a taxpayer ID number. Okay. Awesome. All right. This one, I think we have, I see questions popping up about the fee. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to my list of questions. This says the application comes with a $750 fee. Is that a one-time fee?
I think it is, but let me do a little search on, I don't know. Let me look on the Secretary of State's website.
All right. Awesome. And then are you okay if I go to the next, to part 2 of that question? Awesome. This one says, I saw on the application that I need to become a foreign entity to do business in Texas and pay the $750. This seems like it would need to be paid before. Okay, this seems like it would need to be paid before I know if we are approved as a vendor with TEFA. Is that correct?
Yes, because that's a prereq to be approved. You have to do that in order to transact any business here in the state for the purposes of this program.
Gotcha. All right. This next one says, I am an ESA/class wallet vendor in Virginia, North Carolina, Arizona, and they said, etc. And none of them required paying almost $800 to establish a business presence in the state before the application is even processed. It says before you can even get your first client. This is a big ask. Is there a reason for this big ask?
So this is a statutory requirement that participating vendors have to be registered to do business in Texas. Now, registered to do business in Texas, there are multiple ways to get there. The most common way is to register and file an incorporation with the Secretary of State. But you can also, and this is common if you're just one solo practitioner. This is what my wife will be doing, is you register as a sole proprietor with your local county clerk, and that can also meet the requirements. So the basic idea is if you're a company that's employing multiple people, you have to be registered with the Secretary of State. But if it's just you, or maybe even just you and like a one partner, you have the very to register through your local county clerk, which is generally a lower cost option that's intended for those kind of very small businesses. And yes, the Texas statutory requirement is for anybody who wants to be a vendor, even if they are remote. And I guess one way of thinking about it is participating in this program becomes a Texas nexus. And this is not a rule that we set or that Odyssey created. It is what is in the statute that we have to follow.
Okay. So then when you're saying it's in the statute, you're basically saying it's what the members of the House and the members of the Senate together, they're called the Texas legislature, they agreed upon before that bill was even passed. And so if that is something that our vendors are demanding a change, or if that's something where the vendor demand is something that they take it back to the Texas legislature, that's why we reconvene in 2027. That doesn't mean it will be changed, but that's why every other year, that's why your members of the House and members of the Senate come back together to say, is this working? Should it be cleaned up? Should it be fixed? Does it need to be tweaked? Sort of similar to what I was expressing earlier. So thank you for these questions. We just want to make sure you all know we go back to the Capitol next year from January to June, and we get to say, the second iteration, will it stay the same, or will we make any changes to this TEFA program? I had one of our people in the background that you can't see them on the camera for Texas Homeschool Coalition. Her name is Heather, and she said, hey, Anita, we have more questions about that certification process. So can we circle back around to that? So we're going to continue talking about registration for vendor. But she said, hey, we have some participants who are really wanting to know about this certification process. So a question that popped up from one of our participants says, so is there any way to be a vendor providing services without all the employees being certified?
Yes. So the answer to that is yes. So basically what Daniel was describing of a two-step process, there may be some employees or service offerings that your organization provides that are not going to be what people are paying for through this program. And so the people who are going to be interacting with kids or delivering the services that are paid for this program will have to meet those requirements. And basically the employers will provide a roster of the of the employees that will be providing those services. And those are the people where we'll need to verify their credentials as well as their fingerprint criminal history.
And so tagging on to that, here's the follow-up question. This says, I operate a bookstore and resource center. So I offer curriculum and books. Plus, we do one-on-one consulting. Can families use their TEFA funds to pay for the specialized curriculum consulting, or should I apply separately for the consulting business in addition to the bookstore? Happy to
I
read
guess,
that again.
so I guess the question is, what kind of consulting is it? And is it educational in nature? And so that's probably where it would be just that we would have to look at it and say, what is the nature of the educational consulting related expense, right? If it's a therapy, no problem, probably. But is it, how can I use my ESA dollars? I don't know. Travis, we probably have to take a look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is a great example of something that just comes up in these programs all the time of like the law creates very neat boxes, and then a lot of times the services, particularly catering to homeschoolers, don't fit neatly into a box. And so we as program administrators basically, the stance that we would want to take is we need to follow what's in the law, but we also want to be as accommodating as possible to people who have a true education intent in what they're trying to provide. And so not knowing all the details, I would suggest that potentially what it sounds like what's maybe being contemplated here is, on the one hand, you have a set of products that you'll sign on as a vendor, and then you also have a set of services that might be qualified as sort of similar to a tutoring or teaching service, where you're helping families design, select, and maybe utilize their curriculum. And that could be sort of like a tutoring or teaching service. But yes, if there's a specific example, we're working with the team at Odyssey where basically there's new examples coming up basically every day where there's a new person who doesn't fit in this box or that box, and how can we interpret the policy that relates to that company. So please keep those examples coming. It's going to help us identify both how do we continue to refine our policies, as well as, to the point Anita was making earlier, are there issues that we want to potentially elevate to the legislature where there's people who clearly meet the intent of providing a great educational service who are running into kind of legal or definitional barriers that might not be intended?
Okay. And then I heard you both say that the brick and mortar schools have to have, schools have to have a brick and mortar presence in Texas. And the vendors do not have to have a brick and mortar presence, but they do have to have their their taxpayer identification number, and they have to have registered with the state, be in good standing. And so someone asked, just wanting clarification, they said, does the application, does it say that they have to have a physical address? And if they do not, will it allow them to complete the vendor application? You're on mute, Daniel.
Thank you. I think there's a difference between registering new business with the state, and so that's not our purview, I would say. But on the application itself for us, I believe it's just what your address is, so that we can kind of track it a little bit. But if the prereq for the business filing with the state, that's kind of probably a different discussion, I would say.
Yes, and we do know that there are some vendors that we've worked with and talked to where they use like registered agent services or other entities like that allow them to register with the state with basically kind of, for lack of a better word, there's sort of bare minimum requirements where you're able to receive mail and do the other things that the state requires for you to register a business, that you have that Texas address that allows you to do that without needing to, rent, pay rent or other, more high overhead type of things in order to register.
So in case they are running into, because I'm seeing someone say, okay, Daniel, you just replied to that. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right, because what we want to do is make sure that what we're saying on the webinar for all of our participants, it matches what you see on the application process. And then if it doesn't, like to what you just said, Deborah, now Daniel is looking to it just to make sure that we're not giving you hurdles. We want to make sure that we're removing hurdles or minimizing hurdles to the best of our ability. And if it's in statute, then it's in statute. But then if it's not, we can do our part to say, okay, well, let's look into that. Let's check into that. So you're welcome, Deborah. Thank you for highlighting it and pointing it out. Here is another question about doing business in Texas and registering. This person said, registering as a foreign entity vendor to sell in Texas obviously has to be a registered agent with a physical address in Texas. I think what they're asking, though, they said, we are located in Florida. If we have a friend or relative in Texas, can we use their address? And then the other part of says, do we have to pay a registered agent just to be able to fill out the application with Texas?
So
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, you do have to meet the requirements to be to register with the state of Texas and for your incorporation. So if you have a person that you work with or that you know or a family member in Texas, if they are part of the incorporated entity that is registering to do business in Texas, then there might be a scenario where that individual is eligible. But the bottom line is that they need to be associated with that corporation in a way that allows you to register that entity to do business in the state. And then Daniel might be able to speak to the Odyssey application.
Yeah, I just looked at the drop down. I mean, like we definitely, so like I guess that first barrier to get through that first page, you have to return a positive that you're registered to do business in the state. So if you can't get through that first page, it won't let you even go on. But I will say that we have plenty of approved that are from across the country that do have registrations here. So I will double check, but I will talk to our team to make sure that that's what the intention and the goal is. But absolutely.
And to your point, Daniel, if they have questions like for Deborah or any others who are asking, if they are like, oh, 75% of my question just got answered, 80% of my question just got answered, is there an email they reach out to, or is there a support, or how can they say 85% just got answered? What do I do to get the latter 15% answered so that they can?
So we have a dedicated help email and phone call line. So the way that like it's regular for schools, parents, and vendors alike. And so when someone calls in, we'll kind of triage that. And so then we'll split you between calls to our vendor team, and they're kind of specialized to answer those questions individually. But I can definitely help triage those, Anita, as you get them on your end as well.
Awesome.
I'll also say, at the risk of overcomplicating, that Odyssey operates the support line. If you have questions about the application, getting it filled out, they're definitely the place to go, and they'll work closely with us if they run into any issues. But also, if you have more of a policy question or a question about the statute or what our program rules require, we have this email address that I posted in the chat as well for those more policy-oriented questions where you need maybe a representative from the government to look into it. We're happy to help on that side as well. But Odyssey is typically for people trying to get through the application, kind of that first line of defense.
That's so great. Awesome. Kayla said that helps. Awesome. And so if you are a vendor and if you are not stationary, like I'm in my office and I'm standing, Larry's in his office and he's sitting. But if you're driving and you're like, oh man, I don't see that email. I don't see that. I don't see what they just dropped in the chat. Please know this is recorded. And we also will make sure you have these help links to make sure that we put you in contact with a real person. In fact, just to kind of give you a little bit of humor, one of our staff members reached out to Daniel and he was asking him questions about pre-K. He has 2 children and he was like, hey, how do I see if they're eligible or not? And I said, hey, here is Daniel's email address. I said, I don't really know if Daniel is real or not because he replies so quickly. And then that person, Atlee, reached back out to me. He said, I think you're right. I think Daniel is a robot. But now you really do see Daniel. So I say that because if you reach out to them, we just want you to know you get a real human, you get a real person. And if you find yourself experiencing a hurdle, similar to if you're like, I got 75% of my question answered, but I need 100% because I have to go back and talk to my board, or I have to go back and talk to my network or my team, we want to make sure we get your questions answered. So now, because it is 12:41, I have gone through the list of questions that were already sent in. So I'm going to ask Nathan Bryant to be ready to queue up questions that we can ask live and that Daniel and Travis can answer. And again, if they can't at the moment, you are welcome, Charlene. That's great. If they can't at the moment, the goal is to make sure we get you what you need. Why hop on a webinar if you don't walk away informed and you are giving us your gift of time. So we want to make sure we give you the gift of confidence, the gift of answers, and the gift of being empowered. So Nathan Bryant, are there any questions right now that we haven't asked that can be keyed up and featured? So to clarify for vendor application, first we need to apply with Secretary of State. Second, we need to apply with the TEFA program. Third, we apply to Odyssey account, even if we are registered with other Odyssey grant, I guess that's going to say programs.
So yes, that's the first part. That's the first barrier, Secretary of State. Then the TEFA program and Odyssey are the same thing. You get the same application portal. And so the good thing is that we just want to make sure that we're checking because the offerings might be a little different. And so once you get that, actually we have that on the back end. So it kind of streamlines it a little bit more that you already participate. And then because each state has its different rules about what can potentially be added as an offering, but that steps 2 and 3 are really the same. That's helpful.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it live right now. Heather has dropped questions into the document, and so I'm going to hold off just for a few minutes on answering those. I'm going to kick it back to Nathan Bryant. Nathan Bryant, is there another question that can be popped up? All right, this one says, I have something blocking my screen. Daniel and Travis, can you see that question?
Yes, but I don't know that I'm capable or appropriate to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see it, Travis?
Yes, and that is a little bit outside of our purview, but what I will say is that we do at the Comptroller's Office work with a wide range of coalition partners, of which the Texas Homeschool Coalition is one important member. And one of the things that we want to do is surface questions, barriers that are coming up that we can partner with other stakeholders who might be well suited to help partner with vendors to help you all find the path to being successful. So I'm going to take a note here and bring this back to something we might want to collaborate with some coalition partners on in terms of how can we kind of pave as straight of a path as possible for people who want to come participate in this program. And I think that it sounds like that registered agent piece could be an important.
That's good. Thank you. And for the person that asked that question, I do want our participants to know that I'm on Daniel and Travis. How many calls are we on together a week?
I feel like our Mondays, we spend most of the day together, Anita.
Yes. I think I have probably, this is a number that I'm just now making up, 2011 calls with Daniel and Travis and Mary Catherine from the Comptroller's Office. We're on several calls together a week. And what we do is similar to what's happening right now. We are fielding questions and we're saying, how do we make this the best iteration the first year? It won't be perfect. We're going to mess up. But how do we do it so that we can even get started? And so these questions that you are sending to us, it's helping. So please keep asking. Please keep seeking clarification and confirmation because the goal is I meet with Daniel, Travis, and Mary Catherine every Thursday, every Monday, every Wednesday. We're together, just the 4 of us, and then we're together with a big group, and then we're together with a medium-sized group, and then sometimes I show up in person, and then we're texting. So just know that your questions are super important. I just want to make sure I emphasize that. Okay, Nathan Bryant, is there another question that we can key up before I go to the ones that Heather dropped in? Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Will you be going over any info for getting our products onto the Odyssey site? I'm already approved as a vendor. Way to go, Carol. All right. Travis and Daniel, any insight into that?
Yeah. So so if you're already approved, you should have gotten another link to start submitting your offerings. So we'll curate those. And I think that between Odyssey and CPA, we're trying to figure out a better cadence on all of that right now, just so that they're familiar about how the process works, what offerings are eligible, what aren't eligible. And just so everyone on this call knows, reimbursements are not allowed in the program whatsoever. So everything needs to be vetted up in front of and ahead of time. So we just want to make sure that whatever are the review processes, we're in sync about getting that on, so that we can kind of let it all kind of have a proper process in place, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then circling back to what you said, right now you're working on streamlining that cadence, streamlining that process.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Here's a question that Heather dropped in, and then Nathan will go back to live Q&A. I'm going to read Heather's question that she dropped in. There's from a participant that says, so basically, I'm a bona fide program with myself as a director with an elementary education and special education degree. Congratulations. I have a master's degree in education. Well done. We serve homeschool families. There is no requirement for homeschool parents to be certified in Texas. However, in my program that has been bringing great success to homeschool families for 3 years, I cannot be a vendor because some of my teachers are former homeschool parents, but not teacher certified. Is that correct?
So, unfortunately, I think the answer to that may be yes. There are some other options if they are employed by an accredited private school, employed by a current school, or they are a retired educator, which basically can they document past employment with an accredited public school or a higher education institution. But yes, this is definitely an issue that we are aware of, that there's a lot of people in the homeschool community who are experienced educators who offer services families value, who are not going to be able to meet these requirements. And so, I would say that if you have a good story for people who are running into these barriers and attempting to apply, please share those with our team so that we can take that back and kind of ensure that insight from the ground is on the table in future policy deliberations. Because this is year one of a new program. I think everyone's comfort level and everyone's awareness of the landscape and what's out there is still early stages. And so the more that we can learn and share with partners throughout government about what great services families and educators are trying to provide, the more we can continue to refine these policies for the years to come.
Yes. And to what Travis just said, Texas Homeschool Coalition fully recognizes that this version of the TEFA bill that passed, Senate Bill 2, did not come with co-ops in mind, micro schools, your hybrid schools. And so the person that asked that question, we just want you to know we understand that this version of the bill that passed right now doesn't bring in every single population. Like you said, participants, you do have your master's degree. You do have your degree in special education. You already have like a bona fide elementary school where you're serving these populations. And yet, if all of your teachers aren't credentialed or certified, it's kind of leaving you out there. And so we know this version of the bill did not have you in mind. And that's why we're saying this first iteration, we're ready to go back to the second iteration in 2027 and talk to our members of the House and our members of the Senate that says, all right, you have those who are suspended over here. What can we do about that to incorporate them into the bill? So thank you. And to what Travis is saying, we have many questions that are coming from the homeschool communities that are asking, what about us? What about this? And so we are already taking our bullet points to say, okay, this is how we make this better. This is how we do it better next time. There was a second question that I want to ask before I kick it back to you, Nathan Bryant. Were you about to say something, Daniel? Okay. All right. There was another question I was about to ask before I kick it back to Nathan Bryant. This person says, I apologize if this was covered already. I had trouble logging in. We're so sorry. We also offer classes to students weekly through our resource center. It's a 501c3, but we are not an accredited school. Can we apply as a vendor, as a learning center, or do we have to wait until we can be accredited as a school?
So that teaching service is one of those allowable kind of uses. We'll say like it probably can't be a full-time school, but if it's a class or two, I would say that probably would allow that vendor to participate, but also keep in mind you need the proper accreditation and proper like certification for that teacher to teach that class. So that would be kind of the barrier, I would say, or just like the gate, if you will. Does that make sense, Travis?
Yeah. So, and basically, like one way of thinking about it is basically you either have to be a school that's accredited or you have to be a tutoring or teaching service where all the individuals need to be credentialed.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And now I'm going to kick it back to Nathan Bryant to see if there is a question. Okay. It says, so thank you, Samantha, for your question. We enter all the products and then you will go through and let us know which products are approved. Being an approved vendor does not mean that necessarily all of our products are approved. Yes or no?
That's right.
That's exactly right. Yep.
All right. That one was all right. Okay, here. All right. Thank you, Charlene. Is there a link/website that outlines all of the requirements?
Yes, I will post that again in here. You bet.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. All right. Nathan Bryant, do we have another question? As a vendor, is there a cost to submit and sell resources after you are approved, or is that process free?
We do not charge any additional fees when transactions occur in the marketplace for vendors or for families.
And I will also say, just editorially, Texas made a point to not allow that process after some bad experiences that vendors have reported in some other states. And Odyssey has been a great partner on that in terms of, not trying to, do that kind of thing. Like basically, we're keeping a cap on we're keeping a ban on fees charged to vendors or schools.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And then, do we have another question, Nathan Bryant and Heather? Just so you know, I'm also watching if you're dropping in any questions. All right, Nathan, is there? All right, another question. We give in-person instruction 2 days a week. In addition, I provide the work for the students to complete at home. I may not see all of this question. Laura, I see your question. Nathan, I wonder, is it a way for you to drop it into the document where Heather is also dropping in hers? Okay, I see it. All right, I got it. All right. Give me 1 second, team. All right. Okay, so we give in-person instruction 2 days a week. In addition, I provide the work for the students to complete at home, which is individualized for students. I give these assignments and I'm certified. Could I split my tuition and say part of it is for in-person instruction and part of it is for the home assignments? Could I make the at-home assignments a product?
Yes, maybe. I mean, you could always bundle it and say this is what it costs all in for the service. And you could say this is a combination of the cost of attendance to attend some tutoring or teaching service, I would say. Does that make sense, Travis? Put it all together. And you could make your own description of each offering. So you could do one that's just this, just that. So it's pretty open to however you choose to structure the course offering.
I guess that's the other thing is that because the requirements for a course are higher than for a product, like you'll have the person teaching the course will have to be approved as a service provider. If you want to get creative and bundle things for families, it's helpful to know, Daniel, that Odyssey allows that, because that is something that we dealt with a lot in Florida, is the ability to bundle, and that is the homeschool serving vendors tend to want to do that. So we want to work with you and understand your bundling needs. But if you're certified to meet the course requirement, then that's going to be the main hurdle in terms of those bundling arrangements.
Anita, I just want to say I reached out to the Secretary of State's office when we were on the call, and the $750 filing fee is a one-time fee. It's not annual, it's just one time.
Awesome. Thank you for running that down. I think Charlene said thank you. Awesome. We have 3 minutes left, so I suspect we might have room for 2 questions. Nathan, is there? All right. We have been through the fingerprinting and background check process in California. Are those approvals transferable to Texas, or do we need to start from the beginning with Texas?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is that we will need a new background check for those employees. generally speaking. We are working as a team on looking at some situations where, for example, there are schools that already had to perform background checks on their employees as a condition of employment. Are there opportunities for that background check to sort of count for our purposes? Those are things that we are exploring, but right now our policy is that everybody needs to be background checked and have a fresh 30-day background check when they onboard as a vendor for this.
I was going to say to underline Travis's an exclamation point in bold, italicize, and all the above, that 30-day window. So once you're approved on the Odyssey platform, you have 30 days to get fingerprinted in that background check. And so want to make sure that folks are on it, because if that expires, you kind of have to start the process over again. And that's not great for anyone. But the way that we kind of set it up was like, don't do your fingerprint yet. Make sure you're approved as a vendor for the program. Then that opens that next gate to get fingerprinted, and that those results get sent to CPA, and then they tell us, and then we kind of greenlight it from.
Right. All right. We might have time for one more question. Nathan Bryant, if there is a question that you see fit to feature, is a doctorate or a master's degree adequate for certification?
No. So it's like so basically for a higher education provider, hang on, let me just pull it up. Licenses. Yeah. So it's the educator status. So you could have a license or an accreditation at like a higher education employment. So if you're formally employed by a higher ed provider, that would be fine. But I would say that the master and an advanced degree does not substitute licensure and requirements. Does that make sense, Travis? Yeah.
Okay. So certified and licensing does not substitute for a master's or a higher ed degree. Okay.
I will again, though, want to underline that if we have situations where there's, for example, a PhD, I mean, just as an illustrative example, if there's a PhD in biology who's not able to meet the requirements to deliver a biology class under this program, those are the kinds of cases that our team would want to be aware of and keep in our file to kind of maybe discuss as part of an ongoing policy dialogue. So if you feel like you or someone you work closely with falls into that category, please make us aware.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. It is 1:00, and I'm going to ask one question that I already know the answer to. You are welcome, Laura. Thank you for asking your question. I'm going to ask a question that I already know the answer to, but I think it'll help for everyone to hear it. Is there a deadline for vendors to apply? Does the window close?
Window never closes. No matter if you want to start in the fall, if you want to start next spring, they're open and they'll be continuously added throughout the entire program.
Awesome. All right. That being said, I just want to thank Daniel. I want to thank Travis. I want to thank you both for your gift of time. Thank you, Krista, for hopping on. I appreciate it. You're welcome, Heather. Thank you all for hopping on, asking questions. Hopefully you saw the links for support. You're talking to real people. I want to make sure you don't think you're talking to an AI or a bot. Daniel is real, despite what people think, because he answers so quickly. He really is real. So I just want to thank Travis and Daniel. I know Mary Catherine wasn't able to hop on, but thank you all for hopping on. This recording will be available. We're going to send it out. So in case you hopped on late or if you hopped off early, you will see the full recording. You can hear all of these questions and answers. And please continue to keep reaching out. Help us make the second iteration better. Help us make the second iteration better. All right. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Dara. You all have an amazing rest of your Monday.